hi everybody. I'm Catherine and I'm working with SILT at the moment, and I'm going to be going through this webinar with you about onboarding and orientation. If it's all right with everybody here, I won't keep my camera on all the time, just to save on a bit of bandwidth in case people are joining us on mobile devices or with or from low bandwidth areas. And welcome everybody, and I'll stop my video now and we'll just continue with the presentation if that is fine with everybody. Thanks. Right, so today we're going to be talking about onboarding and orientation, particularly with a focus on students. So our journey today is going to take us through the following route. We're going to be thinking about students arriving in your site. We're going to be thinking also about introductions, so how you actually introduce yourself to your students, how students get to introduce themselves to each other, how you even introduce the course content to your students. We're going to think about setting expectations up front. So that also involves some collaborative aspects. So you can involve the student voice there as well, so that everybody knows exactly what to expect, what the rules of engagement are, and how things are going to proceed in your particular course. And then we'll touch on what I call signposts and structure. So signposts are making sure that you have enough information at the strategic points through your course so that you can actually point students in the right direction and get them to the information that they need to know, and also have the structure in place so that when they follow these links and signs, they actually can arrive at the point to find information that they need. We'll then take a look at various communication channels that you can put in place so that students can actually get hold of you when they need to. It might not always be for a query. It might be some kind of emergency communication that they need to tell you something quickly. So making sure that you have the right communication channels in place, and that students know where they are, how to access them, and when they can get hold of you. And then just thinking about checking in with people every now and again, making sure that you know how they're doing and how you can do that. And then I'll be sharing a few links with you for inspiration, and then thinking about assisting struggling students and how you can actually keep tabs on what your students are doing within your course site, and knowing when you should actually intervene. If a student hasn't actually approached you, how you can actually pick up on knowing when a student actually needs some assistance. So we're going to start off by doing a very quick poll. And this is a very, very easy thing to do in Zoom. So if you have the participant pane open at the moment, if you don't have the participant pane open, look at the bottom of your screen and click on participants. You should be seeing a list of 10 people there. And towards the bottom of your participant pane, where you normally use the raised hand icon, you should be seeing icons like this that say yes, no. And the question that we're going to ask at the moment, if you could just click yes or no at the bottom of the participant pane, is do you have an onboarding or orientation plan in place for your course? Or maybe you don't run a course, maybe you run like a series of webinars, or maybe you doing some kind of training. So do you have something in place already? Maybe it's not as formalized as an actual plan. Maybe it's not a whole sort of series of events or very structured. Or have you thought about this in any way to say that you have got something in place for when you actually kick off your course and start with new students? So let's see. Got some people answering here. So we've got 4 yeses, 1 no. Okay, and some people haven't answered yet. So if you're struggling to find the buttons, it's at the bottom of the participant pane, and you should see a yes and a no button there. Okay, so we've got 5 yeses, 1 no, and a couple of people haven't answered yet. But that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Maybe there's something happening and they're thinking about implementing something, and maybe it's partway there, so it's not quite a yes or a no. But it's good to see that there's a good sort of range of yeses and nos, because that actually ties in very nicely with the next activity that we're going to do. So to remove the yes and the no from next to your name, you just have to toggle it. So you click on it again and it toggles it off again. It's exactly like the raised hand icon. Thanks for that feedback. So what we're going to do, because we have a range of people, some people have said yes, some people have said no, and some might still be kind of in the throes of thinking about this, we are going to jump into a Jamboard at the moment. All right, so I'm going to put the link to the Jamboard in the chat. Okay, everybody should be able to see that. And we're going to think about, if you're going to, so for those people who haven't thought about it, this is an opportunity to think about it from scratch. And for those people who might have thought about it or maybe even implemented something, this is an opportunity to share your best practices or things that you found that actually worked really well. So if everybody can see the link in the chat there, you should be jumping into the Jamboard. If you've never used Jamboard before, you'll find a toolbar on the left-hand side, a vertical toolbar. And the easiest way to add to the Jamboard is to use the fourth item down, which is a sticky note. When you click on that sticky note, a sticky note will pop up in the center of your screen. You can then just enter your text onto the sticky note and click the save button. If you want to get out of the sticky note input area, you can just click anywhere on the Jamboard itself. So let's have a look at the Jamboard and see where we are. Great. I can see a lot of people on the Jamboard. So this is good news. You've followed the link and you've arrived there. So what we want to have a look at now is, what kind of important information do you think should be included at the start? So if you were thinking about setting up some kind of orientation, what do you think is vital information? And for those people who've done this before, maybe you can think about, which questions did students keep on asking you? What are those answers that they were always seeking, where you had to keep on saying the same information over and over again? And for people who haven't thought about this, imagine that you were either starting a new job or maybe taking on new roles and responsibilities. What is it that you think you would want to know at the very outset? So what would be important information for you to know? Okay, so we've got things here. We've got a course outline, right? That's very important. Okay, it will give you an overview of the course. We've got mention here of a checklist as well. Also very important. So a checklist can give you that itemized list where you can actually make your way through the list and know that you've actually done everything or covered everything required. So that gives you a very itemized approach. A video showing how to navigate through the site. Yes, very, very helpful as well. So videos are often very popular because you can actually see the actual path that you would take, and it's actually preferable in some instances to written or text information. We've got another one for the course outline. We've got something for what is the course about? Why is it important, right? So providing purpose and focus for why you would want to do this course. How does it fit in? Yes, excellent. So the course isn't there just in isolation. It's going to be fitting into a greater whole and giving that sort of global perspective as to how the course fits in. Order of navigation, right? That's another one for navigation. I'm just going to put this course outline here with this one. Let's make this one a little bigger so we can read it. Okay. Contact details, consultation hours. Yes, very important. How can people get hold of you? But also within the context of virtual office hours, or telling them when it is suitable, because you cannot be on call 24/7, absolutely, but you do need to be available and make yourself available to people as and when required. We've got another one here. I use Vula overview and course outline pages. Excellent, to give an overview of communication. The team, yes, to introduce the whole team, because different people may be in charge of different aspects and students may need to know exactly who to approach if they have a certain problem or issue. Overview of weekly lesson plan, excellent. So again, a sort of a structure and releasing that on a weekly basis. And key dates, yes, very important. Key dates, assignments, deadlines, so that students can actually plan in advance. All right, let's make this one a bit bigger so people can read this one. A technique from the SILT writing workshops, the Jamboards, for students to share their expectations of themselves and others for upcoming seminar sessions. Yes, absolutely. So as we're using right now, so I think this is why everybody's so adept at using Jamboard. We're actually using Jamboard right now, and it's a very, very easy tool to use. It's quite intuitive, and it's easy for people to access and add content on. And another one here, which ties up with the deadlines, assessment dates, very important to let people know that up front. Right, so we've got quite an assortment of information here. And these are all very, very important things that students might have already asked you or asked you on a continuous basis, or things that you find are important to let people know upfront what the structure is. Because, of course, remember that students are, as one of these sticky notes implies, they're in your course, but it's not the only course that they're doing. They're also doing lots of other things. So students are having to juggle a lot of deadlines and engagement, and it's really good to actually let them know these things upfront so that they can actually do some planning. Excellent. Thank you very much for these excellent ideas. And we will actually be touching on a lot of these during this particular presentation. So it's really good to see that some of the items that you've actually itemized right here are the same things that should definitely be included in some kind of onboarding or orientation session. So remember that this doesn't have to only apply at the beginning of a year. It could also be at the start of a course which is starting partway through the year. And just because students may have been using Vula for their other courses, it shouldn't be taken for granted that students are completely au fait with how everything is going to be working in your course. Because remember that there's no sort of template that the course structure or setup or navigation follows, and each course will be presented in its own way. So it's good to actually lay the foundation from the start so that students have a good understanding of what to expect and how to actually navigate through your particular course. Right, let's jump back to the presentation. Thank you very much for these contributions. And thinking about Vula, so I'll use Vula primarily as a hub, but I'm sure a lot of you actually use other tools as well and draw those into Vula, or actually sort of append them to what you do. So exactly as we've done right now in this particular Zoom meeting, we've actually jumped out to Jamboard. You'll probably also jump out to other third-party tools as well. But just thinking about Vula itself, right at the beginning. Now, I know that when everybody jumps into Vula, they just jump straight in and then click through to their tab and go to their course. But actually on this page, there is some very, very useful information, which a lot of people just skim over immediately. And it's also good to know that this information is here so that you don't replicate this information. So make sure that you know what information is already available so that you can actually direct students to important information. So right here on this initial landing page, when you get into Vula itself, you have tips for online learning and student support. So those two are very useful and important areas to actually draw your students' attention to. And you can also link to these items from within your course as well. You'll see I've also put a little tip there on this slide, is that most people actually add their current courses to what we call their favorites bar. So the favorites bar is the gray bar which appears just below the blue bar. But just to know that you can only add up to 15 sites to be displayed on your favorites bar, because sometimes you get students that actually have a lot of favorites already there, and when they join new courses, they don't see the tab appearing on their favorites bar, and then they start questioning, well, I think I should be in this course, but I'm not seeing the link anywhere. So I think I haven't been added to the course. So always remind them that they can find their sites at the top right-hand corner under the sites link. It's called the sites drawer. And if they would like to see their current courses starred as favorites, they can only have 15 and they would have to unstar some of the older courses. You can also order them and decide which order you would like to put your favorites in. So the tips for online learning and the student support, what kind of information can you find there? Well, the tips for online learning actually has a really, really nice PDF document there, and it covers everything from reaching out to other students and support mechanisms. It has tips for time management. It has things relating to social connections and a lot of other very helpful information displayed in a really nice PDF format. So this that you're seeing on the screen is just a small selection of the information there, but this is a really useful document, and when you actually click on it, you can grab the direct URL to this and link straight out to this from your particular course site as well, just to highlight this information. And under the student support, this is the information that you can find, which basically acts as a hub to link out to further information. So as you can see, we've got UCT Cares, we've got student wellness, survivor support, and disability services. We also have direct links to ICTS, the libraries, career service, and the writing center. So this is actually a hub which actually links students out to more relevant information. So it's good not to duplicate information, but to actually arm yourself with what is already out there, what resources are already available, and actually link to those from your particular site. So once you get into your course site, the initial page is generally called the landing page, because this is where your students will land when they first arrive in your particular course. So you want to make sure that this page is really informative and has all the essential information that you'd really want the student to know once they actually arrive in your course. So you must be careful not to make too much information, because after a while they'll just stop reading. So make sure that the information you put here is the really highly prioritized information. So if you think about all the information that you would like your students to know, it might be good to actually sift it out and say, this is the high priority information I think should definitely be on the landing page, and this is some kind of secondary or subsidiary information which I could possibly just have a link to and actually have that information somewhere else. So initially, by default within Vula, you'll be given the page which is called the overview page. And in some instances, you might find that there's actually a different page type that will serve your purposes best to actually be a landing page. So you can customize the overview page, which is your default initial landing page within Vula, or you can actually pick any page to be your landing page. And by virtue of arranging the left-hand navigation and making that page first on the left-hand navigation, so in other words, pushing it to the top of the left-hand navigation, that will be the landing page that students will see when they arrive in your course. So you don't have to be stuck to the overview layout if it doesn't suit your purposes. A lot of people actually use a lesson page as their initial landing page because it offers a lot more flexibility in terms of content that can actually be put on the first page. So you might want to add a video, you might want to add some text, you might even want to put like a quick little snap poll on your initial page. So in that case, a lesson page would actually work better for you. And if you are also hiding certain tabs, the landing page will actually be the first visible tab. So if you have in your left-hand navigation, you have an order where the first couple of tabs are hidden and students don't see that, the first visible tab will become your landing page. So an important aspect is, of course, introductions, because that's one of the first things that you would like to do when students arrive in your course. So there's basically 3 types of introductions. You're going to introduce yourself to students. You also need students to connect with each other, to connect with other students. and you would also like to introduce the students to the course itself, to the actual content. So a tip here is to just remember that the whole purpose of this is actually getting that human connection in the sort of the cyberspace. So your introductions should really be as authentic as possible, as real as possible. Try and build in some kind of interactivity if you can, and it should really be focused on initiating that sort of one-to-one connection with a real person. So to basically show that there are real people in this course. So in terms of introducing yourself to students, I think a very popular thing to do here, which was actually mentioned as one of the suggestions on the Jamboard at the start, is to actually have a video where you actually just chat to your students and introduce yourself, maybe talk a little bit about the course as well at that time, and maybe even in your video as well, send a prompt question to them and say, now tell me something about yourself, and then have something on the page where the students can actually respond and actually answer your prompt questions. You could also, if you wanted to, just have this as an audio clip, and there are tools within Vula to actually just do audio recordings, or you can virtually do audio recordings on your mobile device or even on your computer, or you could just go with text and an image. But students have tended to indicate that they prefer seeing a video because it gives them that level of connection where they can actually see, hear, and actually get a visual of who their lecture is going to be. And as somebody also mentioned in the Jamboard earlier on, it's good to also have the whole team there. So if you are not the only one and you have other people assisting you, then it's good to have the team there as well. Right, we have Aya saying in the chat here that she thinks that the Padlet tool on Vula prior to the start of the class is very useful to introduce students and lecturers to each other for the human connection. Absolutely, yes. Padlet is a great tool to use as well. It does provide that kind of dynamic interactivity where you can actually see people as they're putting their information on the page, and it does support rich media as well. So you can use images, you could add videos, you can add sound clips as well. You can also have hyperlink URLs. You can also in Padlet enable comments so that once somebody has posted something, other students can go and reply to that, so they can read the information and then add a response. And you can also enable reactions as well. So you can have like a like button or a star or some other kind of feedback. So yes, I would agree with you there that Padlet is a very, very good tool to use, and UCT does have a license for this. So if you haven't yet already signed up for Padlet, I can send you the links for that as to how to actually get a licensed instance of the Padlet tool. So that definitely would cover introducing students to each other. And another important aspect to do is also to introduce the students to the course itself. So again, this could be a video with slides, or it could be a PDF document that you've actually annotated and added things on, or even use something like Hypothesis where students can actually annotate the PDF's course outline itself and ask you questions about it. Or you can also use the course overview tool that is available within Vula as well. It has quite a nice layout, that it has like an accordion kind of layout where content can be expanded and contracted. So whatever works for you in terms of making your course content known to your students up front, so they know exactly what to expect. So this leads nicely into expectations, sort of setting those expectations up front. So one of the sort of first things that makes sense to do is to create some sort of collaborative rules around engagement. So we had something on the Jamboard, if you remember, about making sure that there's communication channels, but that they know exactly when this can happen. So in other words, your virtual office hours, making these known to students. So that would be part of the collaborative rules of engagement, how people are going to work together, how people are going to work independently, what happens when students come together in synchronous sessions, all of these things can be thought about and put together as a collaborative document at the start so that everybody is setting off with the same kind of expectations. So something you might want to use here, you could even use a Padlet for this as well because it supports that level of interactivity. You might want to have it a bit more structured and have it on some kind of shared Google document, but anything where you can actually have all of the students providing their input as to how the course should actually be proceeding. And we did have mention before of those clear course outlines. So especially drawing attention to important deadlines because students, remember, have lots of other courses and things happening at the same time. So making sure that those are known upfront, that there are important deadlines when there are assignments due or when there are going to be assessments, and also very importantly, synchronous sessions. So of course, in the online space, a lot of the content happens asynchronously. And when that asynchronous engagement is happening, hopefully there is good structured information so that students can purposefully carry out those asynchronous tasks. But having that synchronous session, it's very important to have those where you actually touch base with students and you have that time where you can actually speak to each other in real time. So you might, if you have a small class, be able to have Zoom with cameras on, which is best case scenario where you can actually see people and hear people. Maybe you have to have your cameras off, but you can just speak to people. So that synchronous time is very precious. And whenever you have that, the tasks and things that you've assigned for that should be very, very purposeful. So a tip in this regard is to sometimes run a poll to find out when the best time is for those synchronous sessions, because of course you want to make it as convenient as possible for the most students in your course, and that way you're going to get the most people arriving for those synchronous sessions. And the other people who it may not be so convenient, maybe they can make a plan to actually make sure that they're there. But a poll is a good way to find a time where everybody is available and people can actually arrive for those synchronous sessions. So besides the time needed to actually engage in certain activities for the course, it's good to actually tie this up to the course requirements. So when you are telling students about, say, for example, an assignment or maybe a short article that needs to be read, it's good to be able to give them the time so they can actually budget in their mind how long this is going to take them. Say, for example, you said, please do this reading. It will take you 15 minutes to read the article and then an additional 20 minutes to answer the 2 strategic questions that I've asked about this article. It's good to actually give them that time up front so they know exactly what to budget for. And then if there are any special technical requirements for your course, it's good to actually make these known as well as what you would think would be a very basic need to actually engage successfully in this course. So if you are planning, for example, to have, say, a synchronous session once a week for the next, say, 4 or 6 weeks, and you know that it's going to be imperative that they're actually there for those sessions, then make sure that you tell them up front, we are going to be having these synchronous sessions, so please make sure you have X amount of data to join us for the full duration of this 1 hour. We won't use the cameras, but we will be using the audio, so please make sure you have X amount of data to join us for these synchronous sessions. And also find out if there's any challenges that your students may be experiencing. So it's good to get the technical requirements out there and to make sure that everybody at least has a minimum level of access to the course content. So in terms of signposts and structure, we spoke a little bit at the start about what other resources are already out there and how you don't want to replicate a resource, but you rather want to link out to existing resources. So a good thing to do here is to actually cross-reference all your content within your course as much as possible with hyperlinks. So don't replicate the information on many pages, rather just point to the single source of information. So if you have, for example, a page which may be dedicated to sort of a course outline containing deadlines and important dates and times of events, then rather keep on pointing back to this page than replicating this information on other lesson pages or other pages within the site. That way, if something changes, you only need to change it in one place, and your hyperlink is always pointing to the single definitive source of information. Another good idea is to always make your navigation, which is located on the left-hand side of your site, to make it very simple and to think about arranging this navigation in a very logical order, because you'll probably find that students will jump into the site and then start at the top left-hand corner and go down. So if you have an important tab that you need students to always go to, don't locate it at the bottom. Change the order of your navigation so that your most used tabs are at the top. If you have something where you're going to be presenting the information and you kind of be going to delay the issue of that information, so you're going to sort of present it in a phased approach, rather hide those tabs until you actually need them. In that way, you're actually keeping the navigation simple and neat and just what the student needs at that particular time. And as you go through the course and you might need more information available or an additional page or an additional tool, then make that tab available to them a little later on. And then if you have a lot of lesson pages, it might be good to actually think about using sub-pages. So sub-pages are quite nice if you can nest them under the primary main lesson page at the top and sort of slot them into a logical kind of hierarchy. And a good idea here is to enable the lesson subpage navigation in your left tool menu. And in that way, you can have expanding main lesson pages to see your subpages. And it also helps to keep the left-hand navigation neat while still allowing access to those other subsidiary or subpages. Another good idea is to keep your terminology that you use simple and consistent. So if, for example, you've talked about an upcoming assignment, then keep that word assignment. Don't say the next time, don't forget that you have your test coming up, because students might suddenly think, test, but it was previously assignment. So do I have an assignment and a test now? So make sure that you keep your terminology simple and consistent throughout. So we spoke a little bit about communication channels and why it is so important to have these. So within Vula itself, there are various different tools that you could use for communication channels. So one of these is announcements. So if you're going to send announcements out from your site, please make sure to enable that setting to high all participants so that all participants will receive a copy of the announcement in their email. If you don't set it to high all participants, it can be that they do not receive this in their email if they've changed their preferences to not receive notifications from Vula. Some students do this because they find the amount of notifications from Vula too overwhelming, so they opt out of receiving any notifications. However, if you set it to high, it overrides that setting and they will definitely receive an announcement. So the good thing about announcements is that that communication always lives within Vula. So even if a student may have missed a communication, might have missed an announcement, not received it in their email, or overlooked it or deleted it by mistake, they can always come back to the course site and peruse back through all the announcements that have actually been sent out. A forum is another area for communication that can be set up, and this is actually good to even set up as a space where questions could be asked. And in the forum, you also have the ability to make it anonymous. So this is a consideration. There's two tools that I've mentioned here. The Q&A can also be set to anonymous. So think about the purpose of why you'd be using this tool, what kind of information you want to be gathering from the students, and whether it might be useful to you to apply that anonymous setting for the purpose of the communication that you're setting up, that particular communication channel. Just be aware though that once you have You need to put your setting of anonymous on at the start. You can't start off with a normal forum and then apply the anonymous setting afterwards. And similarly, you can't remove it once the tool has already been in use. So you need to make a decision at the start to make that particular Q&A or that particular forum anonymous, and then it will stay anonymous throughout. You can also use the messages tool. So messages is like email within Vula. And that's a very useful tool to use, especially if you have groups in your Vula site, because you can use the messages tool to quickly message a group as a whole, and you can message individuals as well. If you use the messages tool, it's good to tick the checkbox which says send a copy of this message to the recipient as an email, because it means that they will also receive this message as an email outside of the Vula environment. So they don't have to be in Vula to actually be alerted to the fact that they've received this message. And then, of course, on a more informal level, you could set up chat rooms. So you can set up multiple chat rooms, but remember that there's no way that you can sort of hide a chat room, or it's not a group aware tool. So chat rooms are open for anybody. Anybody can move between any of the chat rooms, and people can see the previous messages that have been posted. So it is another means of communication, but I would say it is quite open and it's fairly informal. So we did talk about the importance of establishing virtual office hours so that you can actually have this communication channeled to you in the right way at the right time, and also so it aligns with students' expectations in terms of when it is they're going to be getting a response. Another way you might want to set up a communication channel would be if you decided to have a group or use a tool outside of Vula. And I know there are some people that like using WhatsApp or some other kind of similar communication. So if you would like to do that, that's completely up to you. And that is another communication channel, but again, just to be aware of sort of the sharing of information on those channels, and also setting sort of focused rules as to when people can communicate and what kind of information is put into those groups. And then another way just to touch base with people is to have some quick check-ins, and we'll be talking a bit more about those check-ins now. So a check-in is a way to just touch base with people. It's a very quick, it's sort of an immediate kind of response. It's something that can happen synchronously, so you can do it during a live meeting. It's also something that can work asynchronously as well. And usually you kind of change the question. And you could even have something like, how are you feeling today? You can just put that onto your current lesson page, or if you have a page dedicated to the week, wherever you know that students will be arriving on that page. And within Vula, you could even do this really, really easily using the comment tool. So you could literally use the comment tool. As you can see on the screen here, you can just pose the question, how are you feeling today? Add your comment, and then people can click the add comment button and put their feedback there. So your comments can be anonymous as well, or you can leave it so that you can actually see people's names. But depending on the question that you're asking, you can decide whether or not you would like to make it anonymous or not. You could also have some kind of graphic representation. For example, you could have the smiley faces, and if you were, say, in a synchronous meeting, you could ask people to use the annotation tools and to just indicate which of those smiley faces is actually representing their mood or how they're feeling at the time. And another thing you could do would be a word cloud. So you can also decide if you want to make this anonymous or not. And one you could use here would be Answer Garden. So Answer Garden is a free tool. It's a free online tool. You don't need to create any profiles, and you literally just type in a question, and then anybody can just enter their answer, and it generates a word cloud. So there's various ways you can check in. And another way to do this would be to also have something over a little bit of a longer time, where you can ask people, for example, what is your favorite music? And you could use a question tool on a Vula lessons page where people just type in their answers, and you could actually just build up a list of all sorts of different types of music that people like. Or you could do it in a more visual or graphic way. So in the center, you can see there's an option where they've created a collaborative playlist on Padlet, or you can actually even do the same thing within Vula forums where people post or link to their favorite music. They can even include the video if they want to. And then in forums, it actually provides an option where you can actually respond to that and add other things as well. So you can have check-ins or sort of touch points with your students for a single quick response, or something in a more informal area that actually is kind of an ongoing thing, like this playlist example. And I said I was going to share some links with you for inspiration. So if you are thinking about different kind of activities or ideas that you might want to do with your students for checking in, I'm going to paste some links into the text chat now. So we have the 1HE is a great site to actually provides a lot of ideas. There's also the Project Zero site, which has a lot of ideas kind of categorized into different areas. And then, of course, there are the liberating structures as well, which you might be familiar with. Just posting these links for you. Right, so there's the links to Project Zero, 1HE, and liberating structures. So these there's sort of longer activities and shorter activities, but it's good to actually review these and see which ones can actually work in your context. There's quite a variety there, and it's good to have a look and see what is available. So if you have struggling students, how would you be able to identify these students, and how might you be able to assist them? Because remember, sometimes students may not come to you and say, you know, I'm not keeping up with this, or I have got a challenge with this, or I'm not sure how to do this. Sometimes you have students that just keep quiet and tend to fall by the wayside. So how can you make sure that you are able to identify and assist these struggling students? So if you're using forums, a good way to do this would be to check through the statistics and gradings, which actually gives you a quick snapshot overview of all the contributions that a particular student has given. So initially, it will count up the number of contributions or posts within a forum that a student has done. And if you actually click on the students' names, you can actually see all the posts that they've done. And by doing that, you can actually see when was the last time they post and how much have they been posting. So from that, you can actually see whether they've been keeping up with requirements if you are using forums. You can also use site stats. So when you arrive on site stats, it does give you a snapshot overview, but it's actually very useful to create a report. And I know it might sound a bit scary to create a report, but it's actually quite intuitive and very easy to do. You just click on reports and then select a particular student, or again, if you have groups, you can select a group and pull out the information that you need in relating to when they have visited, what events they've been engaging in, and what resources they've actually accessed. So that can actually give you an idea of where they have been through the course site and how much they have engaged and when. So if you see, for example, somebody hasn't logged in for 2 weeks, then you can immediately know there's a problem and you can actually contact that student. Another way to check would be if you have certain activities that are automatically reflecting in the grade book. The grade book would obviously give you a snapshot of where there are no grades that have been filled in for a particular student. And that would definitely alert you to the fact that they had not been doing the tasks as required. And then somebody did mention on the Jamboard right at the start the usefulness of checklists. So you can actually set up your own checklist. And they are very useful, and really it is for the student themselves to actually know what is required, and they would actually tick those check boxes there and tick off each of the items. So when you go in to the checklist, you can actually see an overview of everybody's check marks or ticks that they've actually added to their checklist, and that gives you an idea of who's actually using the checklist and which items have been done. So remember, this isn't automated. This usually the students check it themselves. So it will give you an idea of who's using the checklist, but if a student has ticked it off, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have absolutely done that task. It means they've seen the checklist and they've added a tick. But it is a useful tool to give them an overview of what is required.
Can I interrupt? Sorry, just to
Sure,
ask,
100%.
How do we see those checklists? Because I use checklists, but I have no idea how to see that overview that you mentioned.
Okay. All right. So when you have the checklist item on your lessons page, you'll see on the right-hand side, there is the normal icon with a little square with a pencil. That's where you edit the checklist items. But next to that, you'll see one with 3 dots and 3 stripes next to it. If you click on that, that actually gives you the overview of all the students that are aligned to your course, and it shows you the checklists for each of them in a big sort of grid table layout.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I've been wanting to do this for ages. Thanks so much for that.
Okay, no worries at all. Thanks for that question. So as you can see, onboarding and orientation does require quite a bit of careful thought and planning in advance to make sure that it's comprehensive enough, that it's actually addressing the right questions, that it's actually giving the student enough information, that it's prioritizing the important information first and then making the subsidiary or secondary information available as required. Maybe, as I said, it's in a phased approach, or maybe it's something you can put on a subsidiary page. It does require maintenance and monitoring. So you can't just dump the information there and hope the students make their way through it. You do need to keep tabs on what it is they're doing and how they're making their way through this information. And one of the ways to do this, remember, is to have those points, those sort of touch points where you keep tabs on students and ask them those questions and elicit that feedback, because it's only by getting that feedback from students that you actually know that they're there, they're present, and they've seen it and they've engaged with that. So the smaller the activity is, just by even asking them how are you doing, it's more likely that you're going to get some feedback than if you say to them, compose a haiku of exactly how you're feeling today and then put it in a decorative border and send it back to me. That's going to seem like way too much work. So just make it something really small and simple where they can engage with it really quickly. And then it's very important to actually follow up, because the whole point is to make sure that students are comfortable in the course site. They've got enough information to actually work effectively and to make a success of your course. So you need to be monitoring and following up with those people who actually are not engaging with, say, the small tasks or activities, and making sure that you connect with them. Usually the best way is to connect with them via email and find out exactly what the challenges are. Maybe it's just because that particular week there's something happening in the home. Maybe their laptop has got stolen, and if you don't make contact with your student, then you won't actually know what that particular challenge is. So careful thought and planning, consistent implementation. It does require maintenance and monitoring, and definitely following up so it can be effective. So Julia is asking, okay, how can you change existing lesson pages into subpages? Okay, so if you have everything on sort of top level lesson pages, so you've presented each of your information on top level pages, there isn't a quick fix to actually convert, I would say, a lesson page into a subpage, because a subpage is a different content type. So what you have to do is you have to copy the content across from your lesson page and put it onto your subpage. So the way you would actually do that would be you would go to your lesson page, depending on what information you've got on your lesson page. A lot of times people have everything contained within one text element, in which case you could just copy that text element and then create a subpage and paste that onto your subpage. If you have lots of other different elements on your lesson page, for example, you might have a video and you might have an image and you might have a checklist and then you might have some text and then you might have a comment field and then you might have a quick poll, then you would have to copy each of those elements across. So there isn't a quick fix to actually convert a lesson page to a subpage. You have to reposition those elements onto your subpage. I hope that addresses your question there, Julia. Okay, Christine, I think I've addressed your question about the overview of the checklists, how to actually see that. Any other questions at this stage, or anything else that people who indicated at the start of this webinar that they have actually thought about or implemented some kind of orientation plan and onboarding, things that they feel are tips that they could actually share with others, or things that people have worked and found worked really well? Christine, yes, go ahead, please.
Sorry, it's just another random technical question.
Sure.
But when you were talking about the quick check-ins and then you had the how are you feeling today comment tool on Vula with the little emojis, is that like a template that's within the comment tool, or like how does that little emoji thing work, or have you put that in as like a text?
Okay, so that particular slide, when I was using the comment tool, I just used, so they wouldn't be interacting with the emojis as such. I just put it there as a visual in the text, exactly as you said. So where I typed the question, I just used those emojis, there's the smileys within the rich text editor, and I placed it below the text. And then I subsequently added in the comment tool underneath that. So they wouldn't be actually interacting with the smileys themselves. It was more kind of just supporting the question and a graphic element.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. Any other questions or tips or tricks that people would like to share at this stage? We have about 5 minutes left. Alia, I can see you have a green tick, but that might be from the first question that we asked.
Sorry, I didn't get rid of the green tick. I just wanted to add, a comment is, I think it's really helpful at the beginning of a class during orientation to walk the students through the Vula site, just so they know, okay, if I need to find something for this assignment, it's here. Especially with your lessons pages, if you set it up slightly differently, it might be a bit hard for students to find certain things. So it just eases the learning curve a bit, I think.
Excellent. Yes. And have you done this before, say at a live meeting through screen sharing on Zoom, for example?
I'm attending in my capacity as an educational technology advisor for SILT. So we're helping lecturers to build these sites. So this is just one of my observations.
Okay, excellent. Yes. And that was also mentioned on the Jamboard at the start, talking about videos. So video could do a similar thing, basically doing a walkthrough of where the course content is, where they can expect to find things. And that might be also useful because people can then engage with it asynchronously in their own time and even replay certain parts or refer back to it as a resource if they need navigational assistance within the course site. Thanks for that, Alia.